But what we want to do in this presentation is we'll talk about how can I kind of, with what I have now, how can I kind of save money from a technical perspective? What are some tools I can use? And also how can I save money from just using the platforms I'm already using? Just some things you might not think about because we're both tech guys and that's kind of where we come from. So the first thing I want to do is talk about lowering costs, then boosting views because that sort of inherently boosts your revenue as a publisher in general, and then how to boost revenue with or without ads. So first of all, I talked about lowering costs, and we're going to get into some things that I think most of us, we might be on different levels in terms of what we're doing for our ad server, so to speak, or what kind of publishing platform we're using. So if you aren't already, and I've heard mixed feelings about this, if you're not already on an ad server, all right, some of us are actually managing ad tags through the publishing platform that we're using. It actually becomes a little bit easier to use an ad server, especially when you have something like 40 advertisers. Because when you get into the mindset of having to manage all those advertisers and all those ad tags, it becomes, there's a whole lot of overhead. And it's not just the time that's lost. There's actually a lot of stress on your server when your publishing platform is actually running ads through itself. Okay, so getting into the technical side of things, or somebody who worked on an ad exchange, when a server has to actually serve up images or have to serve up static assets, as they're called, that's actually a lot of stress on your server that you don't necessarily need. And these are things that maybe as a writer or someone who's non-technical, you don't think about so much, and when your site's slow, it's usually not the first thing you're thinking of. It's usually not like, oh, it's because we're serving up images. It's 100 other things it could potentially be. So if you're not on an ad server, I think most of us know about OpenX and DFP. All right, they're both free. OpenX you used to have to be able to host it, and you don't have to do that anymore. Now they have on-ramp. Okay, so you can hop on that and use DFP. That said, it's completely understood that some of us don't actually use all the features of OpenX or DFP. There's things like zones and sections, and that's just beyond what you could ever need. You just need to put someone's ad on your site. And that's completely understood, but it's a good idea to think about the stress or the toll it actually takes on your server. So on that note, so now I just wanted to talk about performance, because when you start to think that your site gets slow, the first thing your developer might say, the easy route, is basically to say, you need more RAM. So basically, that's another $100. Okay, wherever you're hosting, there's a good chance you have to pay a little bit more, and a lot more comes with that. You don't necessarily need it, but I guess we need more RAM. But when your site gets slow again, the first thing you think is RAM. I need more RAM. So then you just end up putting all this money towards your costs, and you're not really getting at the root of the issue. So one of the things that you can easily do, and we're a little WordPress centric, but Drupal and Joomla all have this available. There's a thing called page caching. So actually, is anybody, just to get a sense of the, I guess the level of technicality of this audience, how many people actually know about page caching? Cool. So that's probably about a fourth or a third. And so page caching is, when WordPress loads, there's a lot of stuff going on in WordPress. You have a whole bunch of plugins, and a whole bunch of them are registering queries that it's going to run, and they're all doing they're whipping up a whole universe on a single page load. A lot of files get included, and that's costly. But the thing is, the end page that comes to the reader, it's the same thing. Reader A who looks at your site is going to see the exact same thing at reader B, but a lot of us are actually running that entire WordPress universe on every single page load. You don't have to do that. So what page caching is when you take the final output of your page for one reader and serve it up to the next person. And you serve it up to everybody who views your site for the next hour or so. So this is really easy to implement. WP Supercache is the most popular, and it's guaranteed that something exists in Drupal and Joomla and almost any publishing platform you use. If you happen to be on a hosted platform like WP Engine or I don't know, if you're still on TypePad, there's a good chance they actually take care of that already for you. But once you're on your own and you're on your own server, it's something to think about. Another thing kind of along the lines of serving up images and things that are really heavy for your server, you have to think about the stuff that's behind the page. So your page, it looks really nice, and it might have an image carousel going across, but those are CSS files, right? CSS files control the way your site looks, and a lot of times there's a lot of CSS files behind it. Every plugin you install that does something visual, chances are there's a CSS file associated with it. The thing that runs the carousel, that's JavaScript. All right, so these are all files that are being loaded in the background on your page, okay? And you might not realize it when your page actually runs or appears to load fast enough, but the way it actually works, or the way your browser works, is that it loads the page, it starts to render, it gets to a JavaScript tag, and then it jumps off to another server to go download that JavaScript. And while that's happening, your site isn't loading for the user, okay? So that call could be going to your server, which is causing a little bit of a headache, but the end result is that loading JavaScript and CSS all in different files, they just throw a lot of overhead that your server doesn't actually need. So there are plugins like WP Minify, okay? Let's take all those JavaScript files, combine them into one, and serve them once. And let's take all those CSS files and do the exact same thing. So when someone loads your site for the first time, there aren't 20 requests going on in the background. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 requests. And then you have some images that are loaded up.
Okay.
Yes?
I notice every now and then I'll look on my Google AdSense and it'll tell me, hey, you got a bunch of extra script in your thing. Do you want to streamline it? Is it risky to go ahead and do their little function that they want me to click through, or is it better to go through WordPress and do like Minify or something like that?
Well, so because it's from Google, there's a good chance you just want to go with their stuff, because minifying works pretty much for all the files that are hosted on your server. But when Google wants you to do it, that's something that you couldn't minify if you wanted to.
Yeah, because they're saying that's code that's working with us is the problem. Is there any risk that I'm going to screw up my stuff if I do click on their little link and go through their little...
There's the potential that if you mess up the ad tag, maybe your ads won't show up for a little while. Do you have a development version of your site by any chance? You have like the live version and then maybe like a test version?
I've saved. I have all the scripts saved somewhere else. I guess I can mess with it and just go on and just try it on my own computer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if it works locally, then that's the way we do it. Then it's good to go. Okay. And you usually tell within the first 5 seconds that your ads aren't running. But yeah. And yeah, feel free to call out and ask me any questions as I go through, because a lot of this is kind of some heady technical stuff. Another thing that's really interesting for performance, and they're actually kind of expensive when you look at the bottom line sometimes, are hosted platforms. So things like WP Engine or Bluehost, or there's a few others that actually will run your whole platform. Sometimes those build things in that are really helpful automatically. They might do minifying for you off the bat. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, so basically when I say local, I mean not the live site, basically whatever is running locally on your computer. And it's kind of in the context of a software developer, because if you have a developer who's working on your site, a lot of times he has a copy of your site that's running, so he can play around with it, do whatever, and if he ruins it, it's okay, it's not the real thing. And yeah, so locally with a file like that, because it's on your computer, we consider it local.
Right, and so with the time, isn't that a lot faster than, say, like putting it in your ad server and then waiting for it to show up on your site?
Well, it's definitely, so you're saying when you're developing locally, or?
I'm just trying to make sure an ad is appearing appropriately.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely faster. Because, yeah, I mean, ultimately, your browser is going to render whatever HTML is fed, and even if it's on your desktop, and you just open it up Internet Explorer or Safari, and it loads, that'll be fine. So if it loads locally, it'll load in production too. Cool. Yes. Yeah, and it really depends on the page caching plugin. So WP Supercache, for instance, usually there's a hook that anytime a new post is posted, it'll clear the cache. And that's usually what's called, you clear the cache, and the front page should have the latest content on there. And it really, it's up to the developer, whoever wrote it, if he thought that far ahead of it and said, no, there's people who actually depend on this stuff going live at a certain time. But WP Supercache is easily the most robust plugin there is for caching in WordPress. The options are endless.
And if you're running a recent version of WordPress, in the top bar there's actually a clear cache button that you can just click and it'll bust the cache right there. Also, like about the changing, like when you put an article up and it doesn't reflect immediately, a lot of times you'll find that with things that aren't hooked into WordPress but are third services.
I'm on June 1.
Okay, yeah. So it all depends like how hooked in they are to your editorial process. So with WordPress, they can be very hooked in because it's it's all kind of just one piece. So. There probably is a plugin you could find.
Is that clear cache button on the dashboard?
It's all the way up at the top in the top title bar. There's just a button that says clear cache. That's in WordPress. Yeah. With using WP Super Cache.
So what about Joomla?
Oh, what about you? I'm not sure offhand what a good plugin for Joomla would be, but I'm sure if you search through the plugins, look for page caching, there'll be something. You said it was Joomla Core Cache?
Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone on Joomla, that's a good recommendation. It's easy to clear the cache. Does it do it automatically?
Yeah, well, you set for
Oh, expiration,
how many
like, okay.
minutes or whatever.
Okay.
I had tried two different caching components, and each one of them just didn't play nice with my head. It hasn't disappeared, so I gave up on it. But the Joomla Core Cache works fine.
Cool.
Cool. I'm going to throw that in the presentation after the fact, so then I'll put the slides up and grab them. So before we were talking about hosted platforms and WP Engine. So some of them actually do some really cool things for you, okay? And I talked about how serving up images in JavaScript and CSS, that's kind of taxing on your server, and you don't want to do it if you don't have to. So there's a thing called a CDN, or a content delivery network. And WP Engine, for example, when you're serving up all those static things, it holds on to those and goes and puts them on a separate server that's not your server, and it's just a built-in feature of the platform. So your assets from that point forward get served off WP Engine's CDN instead of your site. So it's just a big benefit in terms of the speed. Because WP Engine, WordPress itself, it's actually very powerful and also very heavy software. There's a lot that goes on, especially when you have a lot of plugins. WP Engine, if their business is WordPress, they need to have figured out the WordPress speed issue by this point. And so they build a whole lot of cool things, and I'm not affiliated with WP Engine in any way. I'm just saying there are other platforms that, that do the same thing as them, and they offer a whole lot of benefits. So yeah, so in WordPress and Drupal and Joomla, if you're not using a plugin, it's a good idea, or a plugin or a module, it's a good idea to turn it off. And that seems like it'd be common sense, but a lot of times it's easy just to leave them running, and they're not doing anything, whatever. So, but when you're a plugin developer, and I've written a few plugins for WordPress, you know what kind of crazy stuff goes on in plugins. All right, so every time WordPress loads, it runs a whole bunch of hooks that the plugins have registered, and those hooks can do anything. They can go run a big nasty query on your database that takes up 1 second. And like it's easy. You might not know it was your plugin that was causing that speed issue, but it's running in the background silently, and it seems like everything is going all right. So if it's not being used, just turn it off. And if there are things that are kind of query heavy, and I could go off on a whole tangent for WordPress comments or Joomla comments or any sort of comment system, that's a query you don't really need. How many people actually, and this is an admittedly controversial topic, but how many people use the comment system that's built into their platform? So just use the baked-in WordPress comments, cool. How many people use something like Discuss or Facebook? Cool. So I'm a big fan of the Facebook route because you've basically offloaded the stress of having to grab all the comments, having to moderate comments, things like that. You've offloaded it to someone else. That's someone else's problem now. Facebook has made it their business to give you the functionality to moderate your comments and host your comments and all those things. So let them do it if they want to. That's something you don't have to worry about. Yes?
Also, doesn't that help protect your site from being hacked?
Because
can't they inject things you're using the built-in comment thing? Can't they inject?
It is one more backdoor closed into your site. So basically, they can run XSS attacks where they basically inject a bunch of JavaScript into your site, and that's something that's actually happened in WordPress before, and it's probably one of the easiest things to look for as a developer to prevent that from happening. But it's also one of the most common attacks. So yes, it's one more backdoor that you don't have to worry about. And I have this in another slide, but I think I'll just talk about it now. When you're actually moving, because WordPress, you might not be on it forever. You might move to something in the future. If you can keep your URLs the same between platforms, you can just move WordPress over to the next platform or you can move your Facebook comments over to the next platform that you use. You don't have to worry about transferring users and transferring all their comments and transferring. That's a crazy headache that I've gone through before, and I never want to do it again. All right, so from a developer's, and the other thing is, like, as a developer, that's all, I mean, you end up having to bill for those hours. It's just tedious stuff that could have been prevented. So why not Facebook comments? So in the long run, and this is the slide I was just talking about, sometimes it's good to talk to your developer about versioning your website. And your developer should probably know what versioning is. But basically, it's a way of tracking all the changes they've ever made, okay? And there are two tools that developers use for this. There are actually a lot more tools, but there are two that are respectable in my opinion. There's Git and there's Mercurial. And there's also Subversion, you might hear that thrown around. But the whole point of this is that because the changes are tracked over time, if there's a feature that you decided you didn't want, you can, in 5 minutes, it's like a big undo. Just go right back to that point in time. Any point in time you want to go back to. It's great for the developer because he's also kind of forced to log every change that he's made to your site. And that's something I do. I've never been asked by a publisher to do it, but I do it for myself so I can see exactly what I did and when I did it. And I also have the code snippets to show in the event that I have to show code snippets or I have to explain how something works. So it's great to have a developer version a site if they know how to do it. It's great to have a developer widgetize a site. So a lot of times you get a theme out of the box that might have a bunch of places you can put modules, but you're not necessarily limited to that. All right, you can have your developer put in new parts where you can put in widgetized areas. Okay, so in WordPress, I was trying to keep it generic there, but WordPress, I can, normally you get the top bar, you get a sidebar, and you get a footer, and that's kind of where your widgets are going to go. But publishers, you have a whole lot of different layouts, and like maybe on Red Banking, for instance, you have ads in between every post on the front page. Those could all be widgets. And I could just walk in there, go in there, put one line of code, register that area as a widget, and then it shows up on the back end, and I can drag ads in there, or I can drag any widget I want. So the reason that's so awesome for you is that once you have a developer widgetize a site, there's not much more of, can you put this Twitter widget here? You have to bake it in the code, So basically, you can just go in and drop in whatever you want. You have so much more power over how your site looks. Multiple instances, and we just actually talked about this before, your developer really, really should have multiple instances of the site. He should have the production version, and then the version that he works on and doesn't touch. And believe it or not, there's some madness going on where you have a developer who's editing WordPress through the theme editor that's built into WordPress. That's crazy, because you have to type 100% perfection to make sure, that's just, I'll never make a mistake. How can you do that? That saves money in the sense that not only is it much easier to get things done when you're doing them locally, it's just much more responsive, but also if that's how your developer is editing your site, it's guaranteed that you're going to have downtime at some point. There's some point ads are going to disappear, once, I don't know, if anyone ever gone to a page, I've seen this before, where it's I view a page and it looks completely messed up. I'm like, what's going on? I view the page again and it looks perfect. And someone is behind the scenes pounding away some code and it's right on the production site. That's crazy. That should never happen. So your developer should have multiple instances of the site. And actually, yes?
So can we, if you're just a Joe Schmo like me, are you able to do that yourself? To create multiple versions of your site?
Oh yeah, well you mean as the publisher?
Yeah.
It's possible. So there are a few different ways to do it, and WP Engine, for example, or if you use the hosted platform, a lot of times they have a one-click staging area or one-click development area where you can play with your site, but it's not real yet. You can try and set it up yourself locally. WordPress is actually, I won't say easy to install, but it's easy to install WordPress, but getting the software required to run WordPress on your local machine is a little bit harder. So that's sort of difficult, but it's really something that your developer should really tell you all about if you need to know it.
Some of us are our developers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what
Okay.
I'm asking. Is there a safety that I can do?
Software developers are not coders.
I gotcha. So it's actually a really good question. There isn't really an easy way for someone who's non-technical to get set up with like basically a clone of their site. You know, and like that's a need. It obviously exists, but someone's got to, you know, fulfill that need at some point. Yes.
I use a thing called Backup Buddy.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh yeah.
clone your site at a different domain name, and then edit your robots file so it's not indexed. And I basically have a fake site that no one knows about.
That's on WordPress. Backup Buddy.
It's a plugin called Backup Buddy.
Last time I looked at Backup Buddy, I thought it was just database stuff, but it seems like it's way more robust than that now.
Yeah, it'll let you move a site or back it up or move it to a different domain.
I gotcha. Cool. So I'm not sure what's involved with that, but it seems like that might be the answer. So Backup Buddy. I'm going to put that in the slides too. So anyway, so now comes to site downtime. All right, so how many people find out their site is down when they actually go to look at their site and it just turns out it's down? Yeah, that's like, you know, that's how we lived at Red Bank Green probably for the first week, and we found out that we actually had a lot more downtime than we expected once we installed Pingdom. So if you're not familiar with Pingdom, Pingdom's just a simple service that you get an account, it is paid, but you give them your URL and it'll just check your site for basically downtime. And if there is downtime, there are a whole lot of different options for getting in touch with you. It could send you a text, it could send you an email. I think there's an option for a phone call, but that's just something that's working for you 24 hours a day, making sure your site's not down. Because it's better to get, you know, something from Pingdom than it is to get from an advertiser who's not that happy. So, and then there's another tool. If you do have a developer who's kind of savvy, you can ask them to install New Relic, and New Relic gives you a whole bunch of basically insight. It's like analytics for geeks, and you can see exactly what your server's doing at any given time. You can see the processes that are taking the most memory. Yes.
What is the name again?
New Relic. NEWRELIC. And that's a little more involved to install, but that'll tell you when there's downtime. It'll tell you why you had downtime. Most likely, you'll see that your queries go through the roof, and like there's some big nasty query because of some plugin you installed that's doing crazy things behind your back.
Does that one cost money, Ken?
New Relic, actually, so New Relic is free, but they have an aggressive sales team. And if you, yeah, I know this is definitely being streamed, but. Yeah, exactly. No, it's just, yeah, you end up talking to that guy every night. You know, I talk to him on the phone more than I talk to my wife on the phone. You know, he just calls you and he's like, hey, you know, I just want to see how New Relic was going. And from that point forward, I have multiple people that I installed New Relic for. Like, I never gave him my phone number again, just because.
I swear, the first time they called me, I had not even given them a phone number. I just got a call.
They just found you. Hi, this is Jim. Oh, who's Jim?
Yeah, and you know and the thing is, they actually are pretty expensive, and for Red Bank Green, it just wasn't worth it. Their service, their free service is awesome, and you can get along their free service for a long time, but their upgraded service actually costs more than all our hosting and everything combined. I'm like, you don't understand. It's not gonna, like, it just won't work out for us, but so that's where we're at with that. Yes?
On the last slide, you skipped avoid signups.
Oh yeah, so this is, I sort of mentioned it with the user thing. If you aren't attached to the idea of having user accounts on your site, sometimes it's good just to drop them, because migrating them in the future is such a pain. And it becomes such a headache. It keeps it, like, anything that keeps you tethered to a platform is probably not a great thing. And when you have, you know, local publishers, I guess the importance is that, you know, you have an obvious community, and I'm a huge fan of Facebook comments, and I'll get into that in a bit. But the comments are really where most of the need for users comes from. So if you can get yourself to use Discuss or get yourself to use Facebook and completely avoid the concept of users in WordPress, it just makes migration so much easier. Yes?
Don't you need signups for like newsletters and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of newsletters that don't necessarily go through your publishing platform. So you might use WordPress or Constant Contact or something like that. And a lot of times, the user might have a profile, or they just entered in their email address in a widget and it got sent and put in a mailing list somewhere. And those users aren't actually within your publishing platform. Yes?
So what if you create
that significantly calls for like a subscription, where people are going to have to sign in, reveal who they truly are, and create discussion platforms. Do you keep sort of a wall up between the two of them?
If you think the idea of the forum is that valuable to the site, then it really comes down to just weighing the two sides. Like, you are going to have to put a little, you're going to invest a little more if you ever do finally migrate off, but maybe it's great for now. You know, it really comes down to that business decision. Cool. Any others? Cool. Pingdom, New Relic. All right. So we actually just talked about it. MailChimp, Constant Contact. There are some companies that are offering what MailChimp and Constant Contact do for money. MailChimp and Constant Contact are free. You can use these, and it's kind of the most common. I think MailChimp is one of the most common I've seen personally. I don't know as a whole if it's the most common, but you get something like 11,000 emails free every month. So as long as you get people coming in, signing up to your mailing list, you can just, you know, you're really probably not going to hit that limit unless you have like 11,000 readers, or, you know, maybe a few thousand that you email more than you know, a few times a month. One thing that's really cool about MailChimp is that they have this RSS to mail feature. So you basically, you give it an email template, you can design it in there, and then you can feed it your RSS feed, and it'll pull in your latest 5 stories, and you can schedule it to go out. And it'll send out your latest 5 stories to all your readers every day. So The Loop, for example, has this daily newsletter that goes out. There's no editing that goes on. There's no, you know, extra work that goes in. It's really just a recap of the 5 stories she might have posted in the last day. And that you know, that's really easy. It goes out, and it also bumps up page views. One thing you can do, and I'll come back to try to be flexible, but one thing you can do is get creative with the services that you have available to you that are kind of cheap. So there are definitely mixed feelings, I think, with quick ads, but one thing I've seen quick ads being used for is actually, how many people are familiar with quick ads? All right, so quick ads was a service that was, and also not affiliated with quick ads, but they did a pretty good job with the classifieds thing. So basically self-service classifieds, some people say they work, some people, well, the process itself definitely works, but some people say like they've had success, others say they don't. But quick ads was good not just for classifieds, it was good for business directory. Okay, so I had, it was actually Polly at The Loop who wanted a business directory, and she set it up with quick ads. You can do the same thing with real estate. You can use it for quick ads. So this is something that once you've nailed down a price point with the guy who runs quick ads, you can use that same service for 3 different things that otherwise would have cost you a lot more money. So if you get creative with the services you already have or the plugins you already have, you know, you can save a lot of money that way.
Okay, so what does quick ads do? So people can build their own ads? I'm on their website.
Oh yeah, so basically it's this guy's gonna love me. It's at yourquickads.com, and basically it's just self-service advertising. A lot like you put a JavaScript snippet in your sidebar, and someone can post their ad here. It's something, it looks a lot like it would be a classified in a newspaper. Get a little box for a picture, and
what makes it quick? Just that you just reference to their ad and they have the ad on
Maybe
it.
you can do it right on that one page. You can do it directly there.
yeah. So ideally, in the perfect world where advertisers are just buying inventory on their own, they come to your site, they book an ad, they put in their credit card, and they leave happy, and they do it every single month after that. Yeah.
They just make their ad and put it on just based on the price that you just agree with them?
Yeah. Well, so the end advertiser, you set the price that they pay, and then you also, there are a few different packages you can get from quick ads.
Quick ads charge a rate, or do they charge a fee?
Yeah, they charge an upfront setup cost, and then there's like a monthly rate after that or something like that. But it's negotiable. It's on the DL, it's negotiable. So one thing, and this is sort of obvious, but YouTube and Flickr, you know, we kind of say like, they're like just staples of the internet now, but if you have video, it should probably go on YouTube, or it should go on Vimeo or something like that. You do not want to host video on your site, just because it takes up space and it's also taking up bandwidth. Because when someone's streaming, you know, anything over your site and it's being hosted off your site, that's just a web server process that's up and running, and other people are being slowed down because of that. So anytime you can use YouTube or Flickr, or use Flickr's galleries or their widgets, whatever comes along with that, you should. And lastly, so this is this comes from the point of view of a developer, because I'm a web developer. I webmaster for Red Bank Green and also for the Loop. And the things you can do with developers to save money too. Okay? One is that if you have something that you have in your head that you want to try, it's always good to ask your developer ahead of time how long something's going to take. Okay? As long as, like, if you say, oh, you know, I want this widget down here and that's the end of it, that's just so open-ended. Anything could happen from that point. It's not that your developer wants to run up a bill, it's just that, you know, maybe he was like, okay, this is a 10-hour project and you were thinking it was a 30-minute project. It's always good to get him to say, okay, that's 1.5 hours. And it also kind of holds him to that 1.5 hour mark, or her. You also want to be 100% sure of what you need. So if you can really define in your head what you need from your developer ahead of time, you know, just being as precise as possible will keep them from having to go back and make changes. And, you know, these things cost more in the end. And lastly, developers can be really expensive depending on where you are. So if you're willing to break out of the idea of you need to see your developer in person, sometimes you can get someone who's a lot cheaper somewhere where there's just a lower standard of living. You know, maybe they're in a different part of the country, and as long as you can find them on LinkedIn, you can verify who they are, you can get some references from them. If you can become comfortable with the idea of working with someone remotely, which a lot of developers do now, a lot of them work, you know, I could work for somebody in California and never really see them. That's becoming more and more common. If you can get comfortable with that, you can save yourself a lot of money.
Just a note on that. A lot of people, when they start to think about like outsourcing the development of their site, the first thing they think is, I'm going to go overseas, or I'm going to go, you know, find a developer for really, really cheap. There is definitely a middle ground where you can find developers in America that are willing to, you know, constantly be on the phone with you. Yeah.
What's a good way to find a developer?
Yeah, so I think LinkedIn is actually a great resource to find a developer. I would tap the network that you already have to find developers that you can trust. So there's, he's mentioning 2 different services, one called CrowdSpring and one called 99 Designs for finding resources like this. I mean, it all depends what work you want done too, right? If it's a one-time thing, maybe it's okay to go overseas. If it's something that you're going to have to talk to the person once a week and you want to, like, you know, I know as a developer sometimes, like, I'll have arguments that are like productive arguments with people I work with, you know, that actually lead to something. If you want someone that's actually going to help you make something that's really good, it's worth paying. Yep. It's not really a standard rate developers. I think it just depends on what the standard of living is in the area. Like if you go to New York and you want a WordPress developer, you might be like paying $70 an hour. But if you go to the middle of Minnesota, it might be 30. It might be lower.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, there are developers who are beyond, basically they don't do WordPress. They will do WordPress, but their rate will just be through the roof. And you have to ask yourself, like, do I need, you know, this machete when I really just needed like a pocket knife?
Right.
You know, and that developer, you know, it can go up to 120, 150 an hour. And that's just somebody that obviously don't need it. You can,
right.
you should
and
be
you
able
want
to
the person appropriate for the job, because if you bring in like a machete, a lot of times like machetes are not good at like cutting small weeds, you know? Like they'll undervalue your project and not think it's important.
There's some keys to like basically deciding once you find a developer, and I was about to say, another place where you get people who are in that freelance mindset is Craigslist. So at least in my area, a lot of developers just look for gigs on Craigslist. And you know, you can kind of set your price there, tell them what you need, they call you on the phone, and you know, you just talk it over. So that's another good place. And when you do finally find that developer, there are certain things to look for. Like if you find they have an account on a website called GitHub, there are certain things that from a developer's perspective, I recognize another good developer based on like certain criteria. And one of them is they have an account on GitHub. All right, that's just one of those things. If you do, chances are you're better than probably 50% of other developers.
GitHub is a website for hosting open source software. So if someone's contributing and writing open source software, that might be an indication that they're after more than just a quick buck, that they actually are into computers as a life choice.
So what other sort of profile things would we look for?
So there's other
look
things.
for someone that hasn't jumped between 15 jobs in the past year.
Well, I think that's true, but I think in terms of just technical things,
Yeah.
there's also, if you find that they've written a plugin for the platform that you're running on, that's big. That's really big, because that means not only have they used it, they've definitely gotten into the weeds with it. And that's one of the worst parts of getting used to a platform is just writing a plugin for it, because then you see what actually goes on underneath and you understand it so much better. And yeah, if you see them involved in the community, if they're going to conferences, just going to a conference for a developer, that's just one of those things, check mark. You're better than this % of developers. So
it's
yeah,
just like everyone in this
see,
room. Like, what does everyone want to do in their free time? Do you want to spend your time working on being a better hyperlocal, or do you want to just make money? And just like developers, like if they are going to spend in their free time to go to a development conference, that's a mark of quality.
So I'm going to move on to page views. So page views, I have a few things here, just a few things you can do to kind of get a bump right off the bat. Page views it's like that number that kind of supply to an advertiser. It's your own in your head idea of how popular you are in the community, when your page views are through the roof. So on Red Bank Green, social media drives about 50% of the traffic. Basically it's very well defined and it's pretty, it's not too scattered. You have Facebook, Twitter driving about maybe together 50%, and you have Google driving the other 50%. So, and when you actually see Google, people are searching for Red Bank Green in Google. And then there's an allocation of people who've clicked into articles from Google. So there's certain things you can do to capitalize on that social media page view increase. And one thing I said is the Facebook likes widget. And this is kind of an experiment we just ran at Red Bank Green. We noticed our likes on Facebook just kind of leveled out. At this, I think we're stuck at like 1,500 or something. So a couple months ago, what we did is we just threw a like widget at the bottom of every article. At the bottom of every article, it just says like Red Bank Green on Facebook. That's so easy. You get to the bottom of the article, you click it, and then from that one click, all right, from that point forward, every time Red Bank Green posts an article on Facebook, it goes into their news feed. All right, so that's just putting yourself in their, basically what they read every single day. And when I see something on Red Bank Green, of course I'm the webmaster and I'm biased, but I click on it every single time because it's just interesting, and that's what other people are doing too. So just from one little thing, drop one line of code into your template, and you can get a whole bunch more likes. I think we did that, was it a month and a half ago, and we just got like a 300 like increase since then. So we're on Facebook for a few years, and then just get that 300 bump, and it's still going up just from one little trick. Another big thing, and I already mentioned it, that I love it, it's the comments widget. And you drop the comments widget on there, or basically the comment thread. It's a lot like Discuss if you're using Discuss. But one thing that's really cool about that for Facebook is that they leave a comment, they leave your site, they definitely go on Facebook later because they go on Facebook about 100 times a day, and they see that someone replied to their comment right in their notifications bar. All right, so that just pulls them right back into the site to see what someone said when they replied. And it just creates this cycle of people just coming back to your site. Twitter, they have a follower widget, so a lot like the likes widget. Just put it, it's easy followers, and you get right into people's streams. Yes?
I was just curious on the Facebook comments widget. Is there a particular plugin that you're thinking that does that?
Oh yeah, so there are two ways to do it. One is that you can have your developer put it right in the theme itself, basically replace the theme. A lot of times, especially for WordPress, there's a widget that is just called Facebook Comments, and someone will have automatically taken out your WordPress comments for you, and then you just give them like an account, and that's how you install it. You don't even have to worry about the dropping or embedding of HTML code in there.
So that's a Facebook plugin?
Yeah, it's almost guaranteed. If you go to the WordPress plugin repository, you're going to find Facebook plugins.
There's like 10.
But is there one that anyone recommends?
The one with the most stars.
What's up?
People put stars by them based on, I'm not
Oh,
sure,
yeah.
they rate them. Like, when I like a blog, I like a widget, I go and I rate it.
Mhm.
So if you see one that only has like 2.5 stars, probably don't install it. And then read the comments. A lot of them will have comments underneath them like this widget sucks. That is your clue that the widget sucks. So if it has like 4.5 stars though or something, then install it. And you can always uninstall it if it doesn't work.
And there's, in addition to that, there's a box, and it says works or broken, right? So it'll be the combination. You can specify what version of WordPress you have and the version of the plugin, and it'll either say works or broken. So you can say like 6 people say this is broken, 0 people say it works. It's probably broken. So yeah, that's another indicator. WordPress plugin repository is awesome. You can just you can go directly to it, or you can look up plugins through the back end of your site in the plugin section. Yes.
On the social media tips, so this is sort of to increase your page views. What about sort of increasing the efficiency of your different social media to your platform? Let's say you have a LinkedIn, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have a Tumblr feed, all coming from like a Hootsuite account from your website, right? How is the best way to manage all those different social media to get the most page views from all the different,
Yeah, so there are different plugins you can use. There's one called, I think you're talking about when you have all these different accounts with like, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, you name it, and you kind of want to get that in front of the users on your site. There are a few plugins that do that. Sometimes you can have a developer drop the widgets for each individual site on your page. Not recommended, because then you get that same problem we had before with like basically the extra calls that the browser's making. It slows down your site. So you can get a plugin like Sociable. That's for WordPress, and there's definitely one for Joomla. And what's that? Share This. That's another big one.
How do you guys spell Hootsuite?
Well, Hootsuite, that's like a platform for actually writing your tweets, right? So for plugins, really quickly, related recommended articles. Reader gets to the bottom of your site, or the bottom of a post. There's a bunch of related articles. That could be one more click that you get. So that could be 25 to 50% more clicks just in that use case. Yes.
Thank you. I'm on a WordPress platform, and so I have a couple of writers, and I would like for them to share their articles on their personal Facebook pages and Twitter accounts. Is there a plugin? Because like I have a plugin where everything is that post goes to my site or my page, but their individual pages. Is there something for individual authors?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, there probably is. I'm not sure. There's nothing like particularly famous that. So I guess, yeah, along those lines, you can have things that check you can have a plugin that just auto posts it to Facebook, not for a particular author, but for the site in general. Twitter, almost anything. So Sociable, I mentioned that. It's probably important to have a plugin called Sitemap. It'll automatically generate a sitemap so Google can read it and understand exactly all the pages that are involved in your site. And that helps for SEO, and there's all-in-one SEO pack for WordPress. But there are a lot of different tools that you can install for Joomla and Drupal, which basically make sure everything's set up well from an SEO perspective. Just because when something breaks in town and people might be searching for it on Google and not necessarily on your site, it's good to have that set up. Just make sure you're optimized. So now for non-ad revenue tools.
Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about a few ways that I've seen be effective ways to generate revenue other than advertisements. So the first one is listings. Having a directory product where listings can kind of post their menu, getting business owners involved in a way that isn't just walking into their business and trying to sell them a display ad can be very effective, not only at making them part of your community, but also making them feel like they own a part of your website. So that drives editorial content, but also it can be a way for you to make money. And you don't have to overcomplicate things. You can implement the pages, the listings pages, as kind of just pages on your site. They can literally be WordPress pages or Drupal pages. They don't need to be any special plugin that you add. They're already built into everything you need. Another idea which doesn't always sit very well with people is sponsored editorial. So we just inherently don't like sponsored editorial because it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. But if we're really transparent about the fact that an article is sponsored, it can actually be a great way to draw attention to a business while having an article. So it shouldn't be something like, oh, this store just got this in stock, and then it's sponsored by that store. But maybe something along the lines of, how to plant, the right flowers in the right season, and then it's actually sponsored by the garden center. That's not, if you're transparent about the fact that it's sponsored by the garden center, it's not a bad thing to do. And it's a good way to make money, to put an advertisement or just the name of the business alongside the piece. So let your readers know what the businesses care about while making money. Events calendars are a great driver of revenue. Who has a paid events calendar? Who has a free events calendar? Has anyone thought about making their events calendar paid? So there are a lot of sites that make their events calendar paid, and it's a very effective means as long as you can get people to start using it. And I think that the best way to get people to start using it is to offer it free to organizations like churches, NGOs, nonprofits, or government. This works in two ways. The first way that it works is that when people are part of multiple organizations, they bring what they got for free in one organization to the organization that they have to pay for the event. And the second thing is that by having these large organizations with a lot of reach use your events calendar, they're promoting visitors coming to your events calendar. And the more people that are viewing the events calendar, the more events that are on the events calendar, the more valuable the actual spots are to sell things. If the quilting store down the street has a knitting class, this random example, there's no reason that they shouldn't have to pay to advertise that. You're selling eyeballs to some extent. I mean, it's just an ad like anything else. WordPress Events Manager is a great plugin for managing events if anyone wants to go. It doesn't already have an events calendar and wants one. Along the same lines as that events calendar, there's the idea of a specials calendar. Yes. Imagine if people knew that the way to get that calendar was your site, and then you offered it to them for free, but then started paying like other people. So they're already on that calendar because the town is literally telling them to go to the calendar, and then you're charging people to put events on the calendar. Could be a good driver of revenue, like if you work the model the other way. But if you got something going, then absolutely. So specials calendar is just like an events calendar, except it's repeated events that'll show recurring specials in town. So this might be nightlife specials. It might be like a special brunch that happens once a week. It might be early bird specials. And the important thing here is that you don't have to just go around looking for specials that already exist, but you can literally go around and drive specials to exist. Once you have a place where people are coming to see the specials or to see deals or to see events, you can start driving businesses to create these things as content for the site. Classifieds, which we mentioned a little bit, yourquickads.com. I've also heard mixed reviews, but definitely check it out. There are some people that are claiming that yourquickads and classifieds in general are just kind of a good source of hands-off revenue that can kind of sit on the site, be a service to the community. It all depends. I know that some places in America, there are Craigslist towns where everything classifieds would be on Craigslist, but that's not the case everywhere. So it depends on what the situation is by you.
Is there any plug-in to bring Craigslist into our site?
There's not. They don't do anything like that. Not that I know of. Craigslist is, if you look at the site layout hasn't changed in years. They kind of just have their thing and they're doing it. And Craig Newmark, I think he wants it that way. So.
I had a question about,
Yeah.
I always think there's potential for someone to throw up a quick $2 display ad, say you're at a garage sale,
Yeah.
like on Friday. It'd be cool. Is there such a thing where you can just quickly create text?
Your quick
dump
ads.
it in and flow it in real fast?
Your quick ads does that.
Is there a way they could do it where I could put a form almost on my site where they would just be able to pop it in?
That's what it does. Yep.
And they can just go on PayPal or whatever and put $2 in?
Yep. It's nice that and Flyerboard also. It's nice that they can just go there and change the.
I guess it must be a little ad creation thing as well.
So we all know that deals drive traffic, but we kind of as soon as I see the word deals, and I know a lot of you in this room, my head is just oh, daily deals. And they're just it's got to be daily deals, or else it's not going to make money. But there are actually just regular deals have existed for a long time too, and you don't need to use an external provider for these deals. I've seen a lot of pages where it's just a page kind of advertisements, where the advertisements each advertise a deal, and it's just a page of them that someone could go to and see what kind of deals are around the town. So I would consider that as opposed to having one of these plugins. I'm sure a lot of you get approached there are a lot of daily deal organizations that are trying to specifically market their service to hyperlocals, trying to come in, and they're trying to actually they want to sell the deals and then just display them on your site. They're trying to just use you as a distribution mechanism, but you can own that yourself instead.
Wait, say that one more time?
Yeah, there are a lot of daily deals and deal sites that are trying to model the business model of Groupon, but market it toward displaying on hyperlocal websites. And I would say that the same way that a national advertiser coming in and trying to put an ad on your site, it's going to make your site seem less genuine, and you'd be better off kind of collecting those deals yourself and making your own deals page. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, what plugin would I use in WordPress to create an events calendar? Events Manager. It's called Events Manager. And you can also type in WordPress in the WordPress plugin search. You type Events Calendar, and there are a few other ones, but that's the one. And he's right about the stars. Go check the stars. So especially if you don't run a lot of ads, donations can be a good source of money. PayPal, if you're for-profit. Google Checkout, actually, for not-for-profits and nonprofits, has a free donation service, and it's very easy to set up and use. Donations don't have to be, just money. You can do other things like fundraisers or organized events. And the nice thing about that is you could actually advertise your site and get new readers along with maybe getting some money. Yeah, so now we're going to talk more about ads. I guess we're running.
Yeah. So actually, a lot of us, I think there have been a few talks or a few people saying, like, we should think outside the box when it comes to revenue, and we should think outside ads. And I think that's true. I think you should always diversify how you're making money. But I will say this, that ads are still the king of revenue, and we have not nearly explored all the potential that you have with ads on your site. So what do you have right now? We kind of have, or what is online advertising right now? It's kind of print ads on your site. It hasn't really done much more than that. We have video ads. We have ads that you can roll your mouse over and it expands. Those are called rich ads. We have ads that are starting to come out where you can play games, and that's fine, but what we're starting to realize is that you're on the internet. The internet is programmable. You can do anything you want, okay? So I don't think we've even cracked what advertising online is. And I think especially for a local publisher, you just have so much leverage to really capitalize on that. And why do I say that? When I worked at Yahoo, all right, I worked on the ad exchange, and it's all about how many eyeballs, how many people are looking at it, what's the CPM, CPA, DCPM, all these acronyms that I was tired of learning, okay? When you're actually the ad things like, can I do targeting? How about remnant ads? These are class 1 ads, these are class 2 ads. This stuff is not for local blogs, and a lot of people are trying to take this national advertising, basically this entire industry, and apply it to local publishing. And you have some awesome benefits being a local publisher. One is that the guy that you're selling an ad to, a lot of times he doesn't care about CPM or CPA or things like that. He's like, have I heard of Red Bank Green? Yes, check. Okay, have other people heard of it? Yes. Is it embedded in the town? Does the site look okay? It's all these questions that are really, touchy-feely. They don't really get into the numbers, okay? And that's why you can sell things. You can basically set a price point, and if they're happy to pay it, that's it, all right? And that's very lucrative for you, all right? So the idea is that let's stay away from CPM and CPA, and let's start exploring all the different things we can do with our ads. So I mentioned this. This is obviously a newspaper, but is it really so different from a website? It's almost the same thing. This is the internet. There's so much we can do. So that's what Broadstreet is all about. Broadstreet started because we were sitting around thinking, we have these advertisers who don't want to renew. They might have been advertising for 3 years. They're convinced their ad is stale. They've been running the same ad. They're probably right. Okay, what can we do to solve this problem? All right, and John Ward mentioned last night, he said, these people, they're using Facebook, they're using Twitter as their new promotional platform. That's what they're doing. They're getting themselves out there. People like them on Facebook. They're getting their message out that way. But advertising, or being a local publisher, you're still a great bullhorn to the community. Okay, so what can we do? What can you do as a publisher to kind of provide something that nobody else offers? Right now, you kind of have to compete with the penny saver. You have to still compete with print publications. What can you do that they can't touch? You're on the internet. You can do anything.